much, Lenny, for being with us. I have three questions based on your chapter. The first one is, you discuss in your chapter the role of anthropologists as cultural mediators. Could you tell us what you mean by that and provide an example?
I think one role that anthropologists have is, because of their cross-cultural background, there can be mediators between either two different cultures or two different agencies, government agencies, or what have you, because they have some of the language that is needed to communicate between. My experience has basically been with air quality, and I did work in Mexico City, and I was able to help the Mexican city government establish an emissions program for automobiles, and I could translate terms back and forth between the technical people and the staff people who didn't have as much technical knowledge, but I'd been doing it for enough years that I found the role of mediator. And what I liked about being an anthropologist is that when you do it cross-culturally, you can help them realize, for example, they wanted to just imitate what the US did. And I was able to translate for them and say, it may not work for you, because even though it worked in the US. And we would just talk back and forth and figure out, okay, I like what you're doing, but we need to interpret it differently from the cultural perspective of Mexico rather than the US. So that role in the middle where you could kind of help them understand the process and the technology, but then how do you apply it, particularly when you come to trying to make policies and get people to believe in this new program that you're going to put in.
Thank you so much. This question is actually related to what you mentioned, because you have conducted extensive research in car culture in the United States and other parts of the world.
Right.
So could you tell us a bit about that? What is that? What is the study of car culture, and how it connects with larger issues of world climate change, which you also mentioned in your chapter?
Okay. Car culture is, I really had fun with the idea of car culture, because when I first finished a degree in anthropology, I thought, oh, I'm gonna go study the Native Americans or go to Samoa like Margaret Mead or something like that. And then I started looking at the US and realized that the car played a role in the development of the US. In fact, the Americans' relationship to the car and how the US developed was very highly related, particularly with cars and how cities were developed. For example, Los Angeles is a car city. It's not doing a good job as a car city because it shouldn't be a car city. But since Americans are in love with a car, they've developed their cities and transportation around the car. Los Angeles actually had a railroad, and that got abolished because the car became so much more popular. People liked driving by themselves, which of course is the totally wrong thing to do, particularly when it comes to climate change. But the American sense, the whole American ethos of independence and individuality really leads itself to a car being an incredible piece of technology for the development of America, particularly the cities. And this competed with mass transportation like railroads, and of course the car won out, given the American culture focusing on individualism and in mobility. When you take this technology into another culture, it's translated differently. For example, Mexico again, they really like the car, but it's a symbol of freedom, mobility, and it's kind of an artifact. They will spend more time cleaning and polishing the car, where Americans will spend their time lifting the hood and tinkering, and they may know what to do and they may not know what to do, but they want to tinker. Where a lot of the Mexicans really liked the looks of the car and polished it and didn't care as much about how well it functions as how it looked. and it all fits in with the culture of the particular countries. But the trouble is the link to climate change is huge with cars, because the emissions are huge. We've improved this a lot with the introduction of electric cars and with alternative fuel vehicles. But still, America's love of the car and the car culture that drives this country is huge. And it's really slowing us down in progress towards solving some of the issues with climate change. Particularly because then you throw in the other industries like the oil and gas industries, which don't particularly want us to go towards alternative fuels because they're making money on the fossil fuel piece of it. So you have a conflict within the culture too, between those who want to clean up the air, those who love their cars and don't want to let them go, and those who fuel the cars and really want to make money off of this. So the link is huge. And until we really, really work on the alternative fuels and electric vehicles, etc., we're not going to make a lot of headway on solving the climate change issues.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lenny. Finally, what would you recommend to anthropologists who are starting their careers?
Oh, that's a big one. I think they have to look at anthropology realistically. I came to it later. I worked in New York City doing human resources. In those days, it was called personnel work, and really realized that a lot of industry issues have to do with culture, and it's based on people and human diversity. And those who are going into anthropology and just starting, they may not end up being quote anthropologists, but the study of anthropology applies to everything from industry to schools to what have you, because it helps you address issues such as diversity. And we have diversity, we're a very diverse country, and we have diversity in all aspects of life. And by studying anthropology, you can help work with these problems. I found it was necessary in personnel work. I was in New York City, and the clash sometimes between the Hispanic cultures and the dominant, in that case, business cultures, you know, they would clash. But with some idea of the understanding of cultures, again, a lot of these problems can be worked with. The one thing I caution anthropologists with, or anthropology majors, is that you've got to be flexible. You've got to be ready to look at the opportunities that are out there and see how they can apply to you. You can't expect to walk in the door and say, hey, I'm an anthropologist, I can really help you guys. And they're going to look at you like, why don't you go back to Samoa or someplace like that? They can't respond to that. But the basic concepts you learn in anthropology are incredibly important for every aspect of daily life. But the anthropologists have to be flexible and look at the opportunities come and see how they can fit, because particularly in today's world, you're not going to necessarily find the job in the university. It's probably going to be in some other applied area. So you've got to be very flexible and look at these opportunities and translate them into interests you might have. I never was interested in cars. I never thought I'd ever be interested in things like emissions. But when I started looking at some of the jobs that were available and the fact that the US was really built around the car, so car culture in the US is huge. So I had a lot of fun with bringing culture into the whole car industry, and then working with engineers and sort of teaching them that, oh, by the way, people drive cars. They think they can solve all problems with technological solutions. But guess what? People drive them, and you have cultural and behavioral issues to deal with.
Thank you so much, Lenny.